In the heart of Lekki, Lagos, stood the grand mansion of Chief Odebanjo, one of Nigeria's wealthiest businessmen. His sprawling estate was the talk of the city, with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and a fleet of luxury cars parked outside. Yet, within the pristine walls of this palace, a war was brewing, a battle not of guns or politics, but of love. Daniel Odebanjo, the chief's only son, was a young man of charm, intellect, and ambition. Women from all walks of life dreamed of capturing his heart, but it was two unlikely contenders who would turn his world upside down: Mary and Titi, two of the family's domestic workers. Mary had been working at the Odebanjo household for 5 years. Hailing from a humble village, she was quiet, disciplined, and deeply religious. Her beauty was understated: soft brown eyes, flawless ebony skin, and a gentle demeanor that endeared her to everyone, including Daniel. Titi, on the other hand, was the fire to Mary's calm. Bold, outspoken, and undeniably attractive, she joined the household 2 years ago with a flair that instantly turned heads. She wasn't just there to clean, she had ambition, and her target was clear: Daniel. It started subtly. Mary would notice Titi lingering longer than necessary while serving Daniel's meals. Titi would accidentally bump into him in the hallway, her laughter echoing louder than the situation required. At first, Mary dismissed it, believing that Daniel, a billionaire's son, would never look twice at a domestic worker. But she was wrong. One afternoon, Mary was tending to the garden when Daniel walked by. "These flowers look amazing. You have a gift," he said, crouching to examine the blooms. Mary blushed. "Thank you, sir. It's nothing, really. I just enjoy gardening." "Please, call me Daniel," he said, flashing her a smile that lingered longer than it should have. Unbeknownst to them, Titi was watching from the balcony, her hands gripping the railing tightly. From that day, the tension between Mary and Titi grew. Titi, never one to back down, began to assert her presence more boldly. She started dressing more provocatively, wearing fitted uniforms and applying makeup that wasn't exactly subtle. Daniel noticed her, of course, how could he not? But while he complimented her confidence, his interactions with Mary held a different kind of warmth. One evening, during a family dinner, Mary was called upon to serve. She moved gracefully, avoiding eye contact with Daniel, but he couldn't take his eyes off her. Titi, standing by the door, seethed with jealousy. Later that night, Titi confronted Mary in the servants' quarters. "Do you think I don't see what you're doing?" she hissed. "I don't know what you're talking about," Mary replied calmly, though her heart raced. "Don't play innocent with me, Mary. Stay away from him. He's out of your league. I'm not the one chasing him, Titi. Maybe you should look in the mirror." The room fell silent as Titi's eyes burned with rage. Meanwhile, Daniel was oblivious to the war brewing behind the scenes. He enjoyed both women's company, but in different ways. With Titi, he felt entertained, her energy was infectious, and her confidence intrigued him. But with Mary, he felt peace, a rare and invaluable feeling in his chaotic life. One day, Daniel decided to take a walk through the mansion grounds. He found Mary sitting by the fountain, her hands folded in her lap. She looked deep in thought. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, startling her. "Oh, I didn't see you there," she said, standing quickly. "Relax, Mary. Sit. You're always working so hard, you deserve a break." She hesitated but obeyed. As they talked, Daniel found himself opening up about his dreams, frustrations, and the pressure of living up to his father's expectations. Mary listened intently, offering quiet but profound words of encouragement. "I envy your calm," he admitted. "You make everything seem simple." Unbeknownst to them, Titi had followed. Hidden behind a tree, she watched their conversation with a mixture of envy and determination. Titi decided it was time to up her game. If Mary wanted to play the role of the innocent girl, Titi would remind her who was in control. She began planting doubts in the minds of the other workers, whispering that Mary was using witchcraft to seduce Daniel. "She's too quiet, always praying in corners. Don't you think it's strange how Daniel is suddenly paying attention to her?" she told the cook one evening. The rumors spread like wildfire, and soon even the older staff members were looking at Mary with suspicion. Mary, unaware of the gossip, continued her work, but she couldn't ignore the cold stares and whispered conversations that seemed to follow her everywhere. Things came to a head when Titi orchestrated a plan to embarrass Mary in front of Daniel. During a charity event hosted by the Odebanjo family, Titi swapped Mary's clean uniform with an old, torn one just before she was called to serve drinks. As Mary entered the grand hall, balancing a tray of champagne, gasps filled the room. Her uniform, stained and ripped, stood out against the glittering backdrop of designer gowns and tuxedos. Titi watched from the sidelines, a smirk on her face. Daniel, however, was furious. He immediately called Mary aside, offering her his blazer to cover herself. "Who did this?" he demanded, his voice low but dangerous. Mary, tears in her eyes, shook her head. "It doesn't matter, sir. I'm fine." "It matters to me," Daniel said firmly, his gaze scanning the room until it landed on Titi. Later that night, Daniel confronted both women in his study. "I don't know what's going on between you two, but it stops now," he said, his tone uncharacteristically sharp. Titi feigned innocence, but Mary remained silent, her eyes downcast. "This isn't a game," Daniel continued. "I don't appreciate being used as a pawn in your rivalry." The room was heavy with tension as both women realized the stakes of their actions. Daniel left them with a warning: if this continues, there will be consequences. Despite Daniel's warning, the rivalry between Mary and Titi only deepened. Titi, feeling cornered, became more aggressive in her tactics. She knew she was running out of time and couldn't afford to lose to Mary. One evening, she overheard Daniel speaking on the phone with his mother, describing how much he admired Mary's humility. This pushed Titi over the edge. The next morning, Titi decided to frame Mary. She slipped one of Mrs. Adebanjo's diamond earrings into Mary's cleaning supplies. When Mrs. Adebanjo realized her earring was missing, Titi subtly suggested that Mary might know something about it. "I don't want to accuse her, Mom," Titi said, feigning innocence. "But she was cleaning your dressing room yesterday, and she's been acting different lately." Mrs. Adebanjo ordered a search of the servants' quarters, and when the earring was found among Mary's belongings, everyone was shocked. Mary, who had been scrubbing the kitchen floor, was dragged before the matriarch of the family. "I didn't take it, Mom. I swear on my life," Mary pleaded, tears streaming down her face. Daniel, hearing the commotion, rushed into the room. He looked at Mary, his eyes filled with disbelief but also concern. "Mary wouldn't do this," he said firmly. "There must be a mistake." But Mrs. Adebanjo wasn't convinced. "Mistake or not, this is unacceptable. She must leave this house immediately." Mary was devastated, her voice cracking as she tried to defend herself. Titi, standing in the corner, watched silently, her face a perfect mask of concern. After Mary was dismissed, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He trusted Mary, and her reaction didn't seem like that of a guilty person. Determined to uncover the truth, he decided to investigate. He questioned the staff and pieced together fragments of conversations he'd overheard over the past few weeks. The rumors about Mary using witchcraft, the sudden shift in the staff's attitude toward her, it all pointed to one person, Titi. Daniel confronted Titi in the laundry room. "Tell me the truth," he said, his voice low but firm. "Did you have anything to do with this?" Titi feigned shock. Me? Why would I do such a thing, sir? Because you wanted her out of the way, Daniel said, his tone sharper now. I've noticed how you've been acting around her and around me. Do you think I'm blind? Titi's facade cracked for a moment, but she quickly recovered. I have no idea what you're talking about. Daniel's frustration grew, but he had no concrete evidence to prove Titi's guilt. For now, he could only watch her closely. After leaving the Adebanjo household, Mary returned to her village, heartbroken and humiliated. Her dreams of a better life had crumbled, and the shame of being accused of theft weighed heavily on her. But Mary wasn't one to wallow in despair. She threw herself into helping her family and the community, using her time to teach children and tend to the village farm. Though her heart ached for Daniel, she prayed for strength and clarity. Back at the mansion, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about her. He missed her quiet presence and the way she made him feel grounded. Despite the chaos surrounding her departure, he decided he wouldn't let things end this way. 2 weeks later, during a charity auction hosted by the Adebanjos, Daniel spotted something unusual. Mrs. Adebanjo's missing diamond earring was being worn by Titi. She had styled her hair differently, likely hoping no one would notice the jewelry. Daniel's heart raced with anger. He waited until the event ended before confronting Titi privately. Do you have any idea what you've done? He demanded, holding the earring in his hand. Titi froze, her confidence evaporating. I can explain. No, you can't, Daniel snapped. You framed an innocent person and caused irreparable damage to someone's life. I won't let this slide. Before Titi could respond, Daniel stormed out, determined to set things right. Daniel visited Mary's village the following day, catching her completely off guard. She was tending to a small garden when he approached, his presence causing the children nearby to scatter in awe. Daniel, she said, standing slowly. What are you doing here? I came to apologize, he said, his voice sincere. I know what happened now. Titi framed you. You didn't deserve any of it. Mary's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. It's in the past, Daniel. I've moved on. But I haven't, he admitted, stepping closer. Mary, Before he could finish, a voice called out from behind them. It was Titi, who had followed Daniel to the village. So this is where you ran off to, she said, her tone sharp and accusatory. Mary froze, while Daniel turned to face Titi, his expression darkening. What are you doing here? He asked coldly. I came to fight for what's mine, Titi said boldly. You think you can just forget about me and run off to her? After everything we've been through? Act 11, a heated confrontation. The argument that followed was explosive. Titi accused Mary of stealing Daniel's affection, while Mary defended herself with quiet dignity. Daniel, caught between the two women, tried to maintain control but found himself overwhelmed by the intensity of their emotions. You think this is love? Titi shouted. You don't even know her, Daniel. She's just a servant, a nobody. Mary flinched at the words but held her ground. Love isn't about status or wealth, Titi. Maybe that's why you don't understand it. Titi's face turned red with anger, but before she could respond, Daniel stepped between them. Enough, he said, his voice echoing through the village. Both women fell silent, their gazes locked on him as they awaited his next words. The tension hung heavy in the air as Daniel stood between the two women. Mary's quiet strength and Titi's fiery determination were at odds, and it was clear that he couldn't leave without making a choice. He took a deep breath, his gaze shifting between them. Titi, he began, his voice steady, you've shown me that ambition without integrity leads to destruction. You didn't fight for love, you fought to win. And in doing so, you hurt someone innocent. Titi's confidence faltered as his words sank in. I only wanted to be with you, she stammered. But at what cost? Daniel asked, his eyes filled with disappointment. What you've done isn't love, Titi. It's manipulation. And I can't be with someone who's willing to destroy others to get what they want. Titi's lips trembled, but she didn't say another word. She turned and walked away, her head low, her defeat undeniable. Daniel turned to Mary, who stood frozen, unsure of what to say or do. He stepped closer, his voice softening. Mary, I don't even know where to begin. I'm so sorry for everything you went through because of me. You didn't deserve any of it. Mary looked at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. It wasn't your fault, Daniel. People make their own choices. But I don't know if I belong in your world. You belong wherever you choose to be, he replied gently. And if you let me, I'd like to be part of that world. She stared at him, searching his face for sincerity. In his eyes, she saw no trace of pity, only admiration and genuine love. Daniel, I don't have the wealth, the background, or the education that you deserve, she said, her voice trembling. I'm not looking for any of that, he said. What I need is someone who makes me better, who keeps me grounded. And that's you, Mary. Slowly, a smile broke through Mary's tears. Are you sure about this? She whispered. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Daniel replied, taking her hand in his. Months later, the Adebanjo mansion was abuzz with the news of Daniel and Mary's engagement. It wasn't an easy journey, there were whispers and judgments from the high society circles, but Daniel stood firm in his decision. Mary's return to the mansion was met with mixed reactions, but over time, her humility and kindness won over even the most skeptical members of the household. As for Titi, she left the Adebanjo's employment and started afresh elsewhere, reflecting on her mistakes and vowing to change. On a beautiful spring morning, Daniel and Mary stood before family and friends, exchanging vows that spoke of love, forgiveness, and a future built on trust. The once quiet gardener was now the center of a love story that defied class, ambition, and rivalry. As they shared their first kiss as husband and wife, the applause from the crowd was deafening. But for Daniel and Mary, the world had grown quiet, leaving only the sound of their hearts beating as one.